he was standing in a cold hospital corridor, completely clean-cut, a decorated war hero who had sworn on his life he would never touch his family's dirty business. 5 minutes later, he was standing over a man with a fractured jaw, whispering a death threat. But the scariest part isn't that he broke his promise. It's that his brain had already made the decision for him 3 years before he even walked into that building. Right now, that exact same psychological trap is locking you into a loop you think you're escaping. But here is the twist that should terrify you. The trap doesn't just wait for you to make a mistake. It is actively using your highest ambitions, your biggest dreams, and your deepest desires as the exact leverage to keep you trapped. In fact, a famous 2009 study out of New York University discovered something deeply disturbing about human psychology. They found that the moment you take the one action most self-help gurus recommend, the single thing you think is setting you up for success, you virtually guarantee that your brain will abandon the goal entirely. We'll break down exactly what that fatal mistake is in a few minutes, but first, we have to look at how this setup actually begins. You think you control your choices? You don't. Think about the last time you swore you were going to fix your life. You bought the books. You set the 5 a.m. alarm. You had that raw, burning surge of willpower. For 3 days you were unstoppable. But then, on Tuesday afternoon it hit you. That invisible, heavy drag. By Friday, you were right back where you started, staring at a screen, feeling that quiet, nauseating sting of self-sabotage. You blamed your lack of discipline. But you were completely wrong. The truth is, your willpower was never the problem. The problem is that your subconscious mind is run exactly like the American Mafia. It doesn't care about your New Year's resolutions. It doesn't care about your career goals. It cares about survival, stability, and keeping things exactly the way they've always been. The moment you try to step out of line and become someone new, the family pulls you right back in.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
But here is the part nobody tells you. The trap doesn't spring when you fail. It springs when you're winning. Take a look at a guy named Julian. In 2021, he was an executive at a top-tier marketing firm, pulling in mid-six figures but completely burning alive inside. He woke up every day at 4 a.m., lived on black coffee, and dragged his team through sheer, brutal force of will. He decided he was done. He was going to launch his own venture, scale it, and finally buy his freedom. He had the strategy, the capital, and an iron will. He quit his job on a Monday. By Wednesday, something bizarre happened. He didn't start working on his venture. Instead, he spent 8 hours organizing his emails. Why would a hyper-disciplined executive freeze the exact moment he got what he wanted? Because his environment hadn't changed. He was sitting in the exact same home office where he used to stress eat. He was using the exact same laptop where he used to manage his corporate crises. To his subconscious mind, the physical world was screaming that he was still the stressed-out corporate drone. His brain looked at the familiar walls, detected a massive threat, the threat of the unknown, and immediately deployed an emotional hit squad to shut the new operation down. Your brain does not want you to grow. It wants you to stay safe. And to your brain, safe means predictable. This brings us back to that terrifying NYU study. Why do most people fail before they even start? It comes down to what behavioral psychologists call social reality. But in the context of our subconscious underworld, we should call it breaking the law of omerta, the Mafia's sacred code of absolute silence. When you get a sudden burst of inspiration to change your career, scale your business, or fix your habits, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to tell someone. You tell your partner, your best friend, or you post a vague, ambitious update on social media about big things coming. You think you're building accountability. But neurologically, you are walking straight into an ambush. When you share an intention with others, your brain receives what psychologists call an identity signal. Because your friends smile, congratulate you, and validate your ambition, your subconscious mind experiences a massive premature surge of dopamine. It experiences the psychological reward of achieving the goal without having done a single second of the actual work. To your brain, the game is already won. The tension is released. And because the tension is gone, the massive biological drive required to overcome the friction of real work completely evaporates. The mob didn't have to stop you. You handed them your weapons the moment you opened your mouth. Speaking of high-stakes missions, we are currently on a massive push to hit our first 1,000 subscribers on this channel. Building a new identity as a creator requires data, and your subscription is the ultimate proof that these psychological deep dives are hitting the mark. If you want to make sure your own subconscious never locks you into a loop like this again, hit that subscribe button right now and join the inner circle. We drop audits like this every single week. But what happens if you stay quiet? What happens if you keep the code of silence, lock yourself in a room, and force yourself to work? That is when the subconscious shifts its strategy. It stops fighting you with raw laziness, and it sends in its most dangerous asset, the consigliere. In the Mafia, the consigliere is the smooth-talking, highly intelligent advisor who sits in the background. He doesn't look like a threat. He speaks in a calm, logical voice, presenting options that seem entirely reasonable. Your brain has its own consigliere, and his primary weapon is a psychological phenomenon known as productive procrastination. Think about Julian. He didn't spend Wednesday playing video games or watching Netflix. If he had, his conscious mind would have caught it immediately and triggered a wave of guilt. Instead, his internal consigliere whispered a beautiful, logical lie. Before we can build this multi-million-dollar business, we need absolute order. We cannot build an empire on messy data. Let's spend today clearing out the inbox and restructuring the digital filing system. It felt like work. It looked like work. It was highly organized, intensely focused, and completely useless. It was a fake war designed to keep him from fighting the real one. Your brain will routinely trick you into spending 3 weeks designing a logo, 4 days choosing a font, or 2 months researching tools, instead of cold calling a client, writing the actual pitch, or shipping the product. It allows you to feel the satisfaction of being busy while ensuring you remain completely safe from the vulnerability of real growth. You are being controlled by an advisor who is secretly on the enemy's payroll. If you change your goals but leave your environment untouched, you are fighting a losing war against a multi-million-year-old survival mechanism. Think about Michael Corleone in Sicily. He was thousands of miles away from New York, living a quiet, peaceful life, convinced he was out. But he was still surrounded by men with shotguns. He was still living under the shadow of his family's name. The environment was just waiting for the right spark. And then, the car blew up. When your familiar environment triggers your old identity, your willpower vanishes in milliseconds. You can't outthink a room that is wired to make you fail. If you leave your phone on your desk while you try to focus, you've already lost. If you keep the same friends who complain about their 9-to-5 while trying to build a 7-figure business, you are actively inviting the mob to your front door. But changing your room isn't enough. There is a second, far more lethal layer to this trap, and it happens inside your own mind when things get quiet. It's called the friction tax. When you decide to scale your business, write that proposal, or dive into a high-stakes project, your brain instantly calculates the emotional cost. It feels like a physical wall of resistance. It's that heavy, anxious feeling in your chest right before you open a difficult spreadsheet. Most people think the solution to this resistance is to push harder. They try to rev their emotional engines, looking for inspiration or motivation. They look for a feeling. But relying on a feeling to execute a strategy is like relying on the weather to run an airline. It is complete operational suicide. Because the moment you rely on an emotion to start working, you've handed control back to the subconscious. Emotions are highly volatile. They change based on what you ate, how much you slept, or a single passive-aggressive email from your boss. If your strategy requires you to feel ready, you are cooked before you even begin. So how do you actually defeat an enemy that knows your every move? You stop trying to fight them in an open field. You start scripting your responses to friction before the friction even arrives. If you wait until you are tired to decide what to do next, you will always choose the easiest, lowest value option. You will scroll. You will procrastinate. You will choose comfort over growth. The elite 1% of performers, the executives and founders who seem to scale effortlessly, don't have more willpower than you. They just have better scripts. They use a psychological protocol known as implementation intentions. It sounds academic, but it's dead simple. You map out the exact failure point in advance, and you write a mandatory response for it. You turn your behavior into an if-then line of code. When the friction hits, you don't think. You just execute the script. If it is 3 p.m. and I feel the urge to check my portfolio, then I will immediately close my laptop and walk around the block for 5 minutes. You take the decision-making entirely out of the equation. When the friction hits, you don't think. You just execute the script. By implementing these scripts, you effectively eliminate the friction tax. You stop paying the mob a cut of your mental energy just to start your day. But even with perfect scripts, absolute silence, and a pristine environment, there is still one final boss you have to face. And this is the deep psychological mystery of why elite performers, people who have already acquired the millions, built the empires, and escaped the system, suddenly turn around and burn their own house to the ground. It's the identity deficit. You cannot long outperform your own self-image. If you secretly view yourself as a fraud, or a mid-level worker who got lucky, your brain will actively work to correct that discrepancy. It will create crises. It will cause you to miss deadlines. It will make you pick fights with stakeholders. It will do whatever it takes to bring your reality back down to match your internal data. Think about how Michael Corleone's story ends. He had all the legitimate wealth in the world. He had the power, the connections, and the legal foundations to completely separate his children from the underworld forever. Yet, step by step, crisis by crisis, he was drawn right back into the dark. Why? Because underneath the legal corporate titles and the expensive suits, his core identity was irrevocably wired to be a Don. He didn't know how to exist in a world where he wasn't looking for enemies, because his internal data told him that survival required war. When your reality scales faster than your identity, a psychological vacuum forms. And your brain will gladly destroy your success just to fill that vacuum with something familiar. Most self-help gurus tell you to fix this with visualization. They tell you to close your eyes and imagine being successful. That is complete garbage. Your brain is too smart for that. It knows you're lying to it. It looks at your bank account, looks at your daily habits, and laughs at your vision board. To permanently rewrite your identity, you don't need fluffy visualization. You need undeniable data. You need to build a stack of evidence so high that your subconscious mind has no choice but to believe it. And you don't build that stack with massive, dramatic leaps. You build it with tiny, microscopic actions that require zero willpower to execute. If you want to be a world-class writer, don't try to write a book this weekend. Write one single, undeniable sentence every day at 8 a.m. If you want to be a legendary investor, don't try to master the markets in a week. Analyze one single asset every single morning without fail. Every time you execute that tiny action, you are casting a vote for your new identity. You are putting a piece of hard data on the table. Eventually, the balance of power shifts. The old identity loses its grip because it no longer has the data to support its existence. The Mafia loses its leverage. You don't have to fight your way out of the old life anymore, because the old life simply doesn't fit the person you've become. The trap only works if you keep playing by its rules. Stop relying on a surge of energy that fades by Tuesday night. Rewrite the room you're sitting in right now. Script your response to the exact moment you know you're going to get tired. Start dropping tiny, undeniable pieces of data into your life every single day until the old version of you becomes a ghost. If you're ready to stop letting your subconscious run your career, leave a comment below with the one specific script you are going to implement tomorrow morning. Let's see who is actually ready to change the data.